Welcome. I'm with my great friend Adam. Adam was discipling me, and I'm really grateful for him being in my life. Adam, hello.
Hi. I just want to correct for the record that it was very mutual. You said discipling you. I think the reality is that any good relationship impacts both sides. So this was not an unequal relationship or friendship. So just want to make that very clear. You came very well already packaged before I met you.
Yeah.
So, well, and it's good to be here. Thank you. So,
great.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Maybe you can tell me why discipleship is so important to you. Why is that something why should I be online? Why should you be online? Why are we talking about it at all?
I see it through and through in the Bible. When I read New Testament and I see Jesus walking through the land, gathering his disciples, developing them, investing in them, then giving them a great commission to go and make disciples of all nations, disciples who are making disciples. For me, it's like call to arms.
Great.
I know that majority of people in UK, in this country, are not Christians. Some statistics say that 60% of people believe they are Christians. But when you go down to people who practice Christianity, who believe that Jesus is God, that he's Savior, that there is Holy Spirit and he's with us today, if we check the number of people who believe in the core tenets of Christianity, this goes drastically down. So for me, I'm seeing, I'm afraid that most of the people don't know Jesus, and we are called to help them know him.
So you're passionate about getting people to know Jesus?
Absolutely.
This is why we are
here.
Yeah. So I would agree with that. I think the word discipleship is also a little bit tricky because people have different interpretations of what it means. So some people might, in the business world, might call it mentoring. Some people might call it coaching. But actually, you and I believe that discipleship is something very specific, don't we? So I see how this fits with you. So I would say that discipleship is a often long-term commitment to ensuring someone's growth as a Christian, and then also their ability to reproduce what they've learnt and what they believe in not just one person, but many people. So we believe in multiplication. So if discipleship, our interpretation of discipleship is not just catching up, meeting with people, having a coffee, but real investment in their lives, which may be totally spiritual, depending on the relationship. It may also be a combination of life advice, life support, interacting with each other in lives, meals, holidays, walking together around the streets. You know, it's an investment in someone's life, isn't it?
So how did this investment look like for you?
Well, I have to say, I came to discipleship quite late in life. I was born into a Christian family. My parents were involved in planting churches. And so I was born into that kind of culture. And I went to university and I became the president of the University Christian Union, which was a sort of a large, small group of people. And I was involved in small groups in churches. But it was only until I got involved with the Navigators, so an organization that exists for the purpose of one-to-one life-on-life investment, did I start to realize actually I'd been missing a whole part of what Jesus was commissioning Christians to do at the end of the Gospels. So I was quite late, and I was probably in my mid-20s when I first really caught that. And so I felt that I was able to, firstly, I had to pick up on some of the language, some of the motivation. So just saying the Great Commission, I knew what the Great Commission was in Matthew 28. but I hadn't really understood that I had to, that actually that was to me, that wasn't just to the disciples. So I came to it quite late, but once I got that, and once I realized that it was a bit of a paradigm shift for me, so it wasn't just, the focus wasn't on church, going to church, taking the people to church, that actually I was, with the Holy Spirit, a partner in this great endeavor. Then I started meeting with students in Leicester, one-on-one, students that had shown an interest in faith. And that was quite a steep learning curve, because even though I was in my 20s and they were about, 18, 19, I still felt a bit of a generational thing. I was working and I wasn't a student anymore. And then some of the people I met up with started to get older, a bit older, and I started to feel like I had more to relate. And so, it came to it late, started with students, moved into people who were more like me in the working world. And it became more important because I started to see not just how I could help them, but how they could help me. And so one of the first things I did really was to find someone I could meet with regularly. And I don't know whether you find this, but as men, we don't really have a very clubby meeting up kind of culture. We may meet in groups, go to the pub, go to a football match, even go to the cinema. But one-to-one isn't something we do. Women do that really well. Yeah. And I don't know whether that's due to the fact we don't like that level of intimacy, or we get a bit awkward because we'll have to talk to each other. But so going to find someone who's prepared to meet with me regularly, give them access to my whole life, ask me really difficult questions about my choices, my morality, my ethics, and also for them to give me the opportunity of holding them to account. That's quite rare. That's quite rare to find that. So I had to find out some older Christians, which I did do, and they're still in my life, and I've had other people. So that's just very, very quickly, that's how I got started in discipleship.
Something you just said, like this meeting 101, and previously you also mentioned that some people see discipleship or leadership / mentoring / whatever. Recently I was on a call, and there was Nicky Gamble was talking about multiplication, and he was talking from the perspective of church leader and multiplication of the churches as well. But he said something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, for first 10 years I was meeting, we had a group meetings in a team, and then there was this book, I think it was by Timothy Keller, The Best Things I Ever Achieved was in one-on-one meetings. And then Nicky started meeting with people in one-on-one meetings. Everyone would come out with different vision, different idea, but it would be moving forward. Like, these one-to-one meetings really are so powerful that they can change something drastically, can they?
They can. And the thing is that in a busy world, they're kind of counterintuitive, because we see meeting one-to-one as time consuming. So meeting in larger groups, you can get more done, talk to more people, and you can, church leaders love it because you can get more people excited. But actually, sitting in someone's sitting room of an evening and afternoon and listening to them about why they got married, or why they got divorced, or why they couldn't have children, or why, whatever the subject might be, is more about, that's more life-changing than sitting in a meeting talking about, right, we're going to put on this concert and we're going to do this. And I'm not being negative. I didn't hear the thing from Nicky Gamble, but the focus on church multiplication is I think slightly ahead of where Jesus was. So when Jesus gave the commission, he talked about people, make disciples of people, baptizing them. And the result of making all these Christians and disciples is churches formed. He didn't say go make churches and then disciple people. He said make disciples. And then the impact of that is that Christians want to hang out with each other, and there you have a church. But actually, church exists for the people who are not members. So churches are not designed or shouldn't be designed to look after all the Christians. They're designed to excite people to go back out and talk to their neighbors and their community. And that's why discipleship is so important, to teach people how to reproduce Christians who follow Jesus, who follow Jesus, who follow Jesus. And 2 Timothy 2:2 says that. Find the people who can be trusted to pass on what you've learned. And so that passing on, and the challenge in church leadership is that, for me, it's all about addition and not multiplication. And I think church leaders need to be honest that they're not talking about multiplication, they're talking about addition. We add Christians to our number, but we're not adding non-Christians. And if we want to be involved in adding more and more people, we've got to multiply, not just add.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one-to-one is really important. Absolutely.
So where do you see this? You just said adding the Christians. We are talking about discipleship. Do you see the difference between being Christian and being disciple?
Absolutely. So I would look at three kind of phrases, words beginning with E. So for me, there's the evangelizing, there's the establishing, and then there's the equipping. And I would think that we're starting off with the evangelizing of people. Of people. We are spreading the good news of Jesus, and we are winning people in that word to the gospel. So you can become a Christian, but that's not it, because we need you to be established. So I can buy a plant and I can stick it in the ground and I can just hope that something's going to happen, but I've got to look after it. And establish that plant, make sure it gets through the winter, make sure it gets to the next spring, make sure it's watered and fed. And when it's grown deep roots, then I will be able to equip them to go on and do exactly the same thing that I have done with them with somebody else. So you can be a Christian and not grow. You can say that you are a Christian and not go anywhere with your faith. And I often say to people who talk to me about, oh, I'm a Christian, or I don't really go for this, don't really go any further than that. I'm just a Christian. But the devil believes in God.
Yeah.
The devil believes in Jesus.
Yeah.
So what makes you any different to the devil or God? And that to me would be the next step of, I do something with my faith. So that for me is establishing really important part of taking the Christian who's given their life or come to some understanding of faith to a deeper level.
Yeah, yeah. And we are not great in it in churches, are we? Because I'm finding those who would say, yes, I believe in discipleship. Do you do it? When I ask question, do you do it? Did you teach someone how to pray? Who did you share the gospel with? Do you have the 30 seconds, elevator pitch or whatever? Most of the times I hear no. What is your experience with this?
So I don't want to knock churches, because I think they have, the local congregation is a really important resource to Christians. But when you ask that question and you get the reply that clearly, by the look of your face, is disappointing to you, it's because those people have not been taught. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Is someone becomes a Christian, you teach them about the Bible, you teach them about their faith, you teach them, you go deeper in their faith, because obviously if they say they're a Christian, they've come to some understanding, and you want them to go higher and deeper, and you want them to understand what happens next, the challenges that come. So part of that is, I want you to be able to go to the bus stop or stop someone in the shop and talk to them about Jesus. And some people don't know how to do that. They get, I don't know enough about the Bible. So that's really important. And the other thing I have to say, and it's going to be a bit controversial, is we're very quick to say someone's a Christian.
Yeah.
And I think that might be part of our challenge, is we've not been as thorough as we could be about making sure someone is a Christian before they're a Christian. One of the guys who's discipled me over the years said to me, it's a bit like joining the Royal Marines. If you want to join the Royal Marines, you know that when you join them, you get a uniform and you get told how to wear that uniform and what's important, how to look after it. And then all the training comes. You're not sort of in the Royal Marines. You are in it or you're not. And the reality for us as Christians is, you know, we have to get people, you are a Christian and this is what it means. Too many people who talk to me about being a Christian say, oh, I don't really read my Bible very much. Would a Royal Marine say, I don't really know how to use my gun? It just wouldn't happen, would it? Yeah. So the church, my criticism of the church is it calls many people to faith, but very few people to obedience. And so church is full of people with faith and hands in the air and praying, wonderful. But, you know, are they feeding themselves at home during the week? And have we got them beyond the emotional attachment to some of our church characteristics? And that's probably some of our leaders too. So discipleship for me is about someone becoming a Christian, is taking them on that journey. And it may be you have the privilege of walking with someone for a long, long time, years, because they live near you and you're involved in the same things together. It may be that you just have them for a moment. You know, I've got a son who's 13, and I'm going to know him for the whole of my life. And, you know, I held him in his arms when he was first born, and I've helped him grow and, you know, physically, and fed him and clothed him and taken him places. And to me, that is discipleship. To me, that is a level of investment that I would call discipleship. And obviously I don't have that privilege of doing that with men who are fully grown, but it's similar, of putting something of yourself in someone, investing time and energy and 360 degrees interest in who that person is. You know, you and me, you know, Mac, you and I, we live near each other. We're involved in each other's lives every single day. You moved to a different city, and I stayed in the same city. And it has been hard, hasn't it? It has been hard to stay in touch. Probably more me not staying in touch with you than you wanting to stay in touch with me, because life for both of us changes. And so it's natural that a discipling relationship changes, which I think is healthy, but it still requires the fact that you and I are still talking and we're still in touch. That's still a connection. That's still an important emotional bond, and that to me only comes when you pour your life into somebody and they pour their life into you. So if you're not discipling someone, if you don't know when their birthday is, you're not discipling if you're interested in how they're feeling and you're in touch with them at least once a day. That's what I would say. You know, at least once a day, or, you know, during the week you've spoken to them electronically maybe a number of times. That's the intensity of the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's different to mentoring, because I said that right at the beginning, these words. So in the business world, people would call this mentoring. I don't call it mentoring, because all the professional mentors I know would say, well, you know, you can contact me at this time, but not after this time. Or,
yeah,
you know, we never went to the cinema. You know, they wouldn't know my birthday.
We are talking about when people are called Christians. It reminded me recently in a small group setting, we did a study. A friend chose to go through Acts 11, verse 26, and when 25, then Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. So first, I'm seeing here this discipleship. I'm assuming this is discipleship relationship of Barnabas and Saul, but then it also says the disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. So it wasn't everyone who was there was called Christians. It's the disciples that were called Christians. So would you say that, or the question to me opens whether you can be Christian only when you're a disciple, or you can be disciple only when you're a Christian? Like which which phrase encompasses the other one?
It's a good question. I think, so bearing in mind, Antioch was a very cosmopolitan, thriving city with all sorts of people. Classing people into certain categories became more important because they were the Jews.
Yeah.
And they would be seen as all Jews, but there were a specific kind of Jews who wanted to be different, who were behaving differently. So people were classed differently, and they became, the Christians, followers of Jesus. And I think ultimately you are a disciple if you follow Jesus. So you can be a Christian, but are you following Jesus? Should be an objective analysis, really. And I think there are characteristics of who a Christian is, and therefore that to me would be you are a disciple. I don't think it needs to be more complicated than that. I do think that if you're not a disciple, I would start to question whether you're a Christian, and that's controversial. But as we're talking out loud, I think we're far more timid than we should be about saying what is Christianity, what is our faith, and what isn't, because we kind of think success, and this is something Timothy Keller says right at the beginning of his book on a center church. He says that faithfulness has been the category for success. So when you lead a church, maybe it's not growing, maybe you've not got lots of things going on, people say, well, he's very faithful. They open the Bible and they open their doors and they're faithful. And he's arguing that that's not enough. That's like foundation. Actually, our task is to be, not just faithful, but it is to be, to actually have growth, to grow. So a tree just standing there, Jesus was very challenging, wasn't he, about the fig tree? That just because it's a fig tree, it didn't produce any growth. So the point of the success factor is growth, in the same way that I would say that if you're not being a disciple, and there are characteristics of what we would say that means, then I don't think you're being a Christian. Doesn't mean you don't believe in God. In the same way, you own a football and you're standing there in your best Chelsea kit, Liverpool kit, but if you're not playing for Chelsea, you're not in the Chelsea team, are you? So I think we need to be, and I think being provocative like that I'm being provocative like to deliberately tell people that there should be, like Martin Luther King said, a fierce urgency of now. Don't sleep in your faith. If you're a Christian and you believe Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, then do something about that.
Yeah. You said that Navigators stepped into your life. How did this happen? So the reason I'm saying this, I know a person who was Navigator in one church. We stuck church together, but we never really spoke at that time. There was a point where he moved to different church. I moved to different church. It happened to be the same one. And this is when, through you, I began to know him. So he was around me. We were stuck in church together. We never spoke about this discipleship. I was eager. Like, how did you get there?
So some people look at discipleship as a very subtle thing. So someone might want to get into your life and talk to you over a period of time before you even realize that they're discipling you. Also, promoting an organization, also the Navigators, is also something that's cultural. So some people might not even want to even relate that they're part of an organization. So for me, I came to Leicester and I met a guy who said to me, I hear you want to be Prime Minister. So I was involved in politics and I wanted to be Prime Minister. And if I'm honest, I still do. I think I'll be very good. And he said, as a response to me saying, yes, I want to be Prime Minister, he looked straight at me and said, what a small vision you have. And he walked away. And I was stood there thinking, what did he just say? I want to be the leader of my country. And he's saying that that is a small vision. So it annoyed me. But it got my interest because I said, I not the same day, but I went to see him and said, you said this to me. What do you mean? What bigger vision would you have me do? And obviously I'm already a Christian, and I've been at that time involved in lots of church activities. And he pitched to me a different approach to my faith and how I could be significant in the kingdom of God. And through a conversation that stretched 15 years, I've come on a journey which understands that you can be significant for God without seeking to be prominent. And those are two really specific things. So in politics, your entire ambition is to get elected and to become something, right? So that's about seeking prominence, to be seen to be somebody. But what he was arguing was, actually, you should be seeking to be significant. Doesn't matter whether everyone knows who you are, doesn't matter whether you're famous, but are you doing things that lead to a significant change and a significant impact? And actually, that appealed to me more over time than trying to be the prominent person. So the biblical examples would be people like Joseph and the people like Daniel. So Joseph became essentially the most powerful man in Egypt, and at that time in the world, had all the power of Pharaoh, but wasn't Pharaoh. And to some extent, you could spend a lot of time on Joseph, but to some extent, God protected him. So he didn't have ultimate power, because we all know that ultimate power can corrupt you. But he was able to influence the king and a whole nation and other nations through his significance and his advisory role. But if he'd sought to become the most powerful person, to become Pharaoh, it might have destroyed him, but he wouldn't have got there because Pharaoh wouldn't have allowed him and all the rest of it. So Daniel, the same, always being behind the scenes, always someone influencing the kings rather than being the king. And so my brother was telling me that you can have the same national impact if you want to, but seek a different way. And so that was his call to me and for my life to change my perspective. And I guess the impact of that is that when you choose to meet with other people, your whole perspective is different. So when I met with you, it wasn't about making myself good. It was about how can I help Mac become more significant with his friends, with his family maybe, but certainly with all the people that he comes to meet in his life. How can I invest in him to make him more significant? And we've talked about multiplication and how you might meet with people. And as a result of that perspective, not as a result of me meeting up, you can see how that changes how you engage with people. You've had a football team, you got a football team together, you get groups of people together, you socialize. You're a very sociable guy anyway, aren't you? So, that's something that's your natural gift, to be social. But in that social setting, your perspective is, we're not just sitting around having pizza, watching a film. I'm going to be very intentional with these 6 men. We're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to talk about how they can make themselves, and suddenly Adam, hopefully maybe giving a different perspective to Mac, means that Mac's influence on the 6 most important people in his life leads that way. And if they catch that from you, then they may have 6 people in their lives each. And suddenly, we're talking hundreds of people very quickly. And to me, so answering your question, that's how I got involved. That's how my perspective was changed, moving from trying to be prominent to being significant, but also how I started to look at you in a different way, or how I looked at you in a different way. And you can see how, if I'd just been thinking about you, helping you with your issues on a day-to-day basis, you and I just going to the cinema or walking down the street, you and I just talking about life, wonderful. You're stronger, I'm stronger. But it stops there. So the importance of encouraging you and you encouraging me to do that with more people. That's where our significance can develop. And that's the message of the gospel right at the end of Matthew. Go and make disciples, plural.
How do you become this intentional? How do you find this discipleship in within the small groups, for example? Say you've got 12 people in a group. Do you spend so much time? Do you call every single person every day from this 12 people? Like, how do you go about this?
Until recently, I was leading a small group of about 23 people. And it's interesting how, looking back on how I approached that. So overall, you have a weekly meeting and we open the Bible. And so I did have a bit of a curriculum or a plan for that. And what we would do in those studies and where those studies would take us. So the whole group would be at A, and I'd hope by the end of this study would be at E, and the series of books we looked at. So there was this grand plan, if you like. And then also there would be ways of, there are 2 or 3 people in that group who I think could be real leaders of this group going forwards. So thinking about, so how would I have less of me and more of other people? So I would pick out those 3 people, and I would be encouraging them offline individually about where they could play their part. And in the most part, 2 of those people were women. So I matched them up with someone who shares the same view of discipleship as me. So they would meet with them, and I met with the guy. And then, of course, you start to see in those 3 people who's going to grab this vision of investment and multiplication through those one-to-one conversations. And it may be that only one person, and it may be none of them. That's okay, because what you want is they can run this group. My job then might be to step back a bit and help people individually, or recruit other people. I think it's important in this discipleship world to remember that Jesus selected people. So I think selection is still very important. Jesus selected who he was going to invest in. He selected a group of 12 people who were annoying and lovely and challenging and easy and all of that. And even when he died and rose again, they still weren't finished product. So selection is really crucial, and not everyone is going to get this. So we don't really hear a lot about the 72 after he sends them out. We hear a lot about the 12. Who knows how many of the 72 worked and how that continued. So I think it's okay to have a big group of people that you work with, and then you select from that the people that you might go a bit deeper and further with. Not everyone is called to be the kind of disciple maker that you and I are talking about. And that's okay.
So you mentioned about some of those qualities or some of those criteria that we need to search for, like somebody's loving, challenging. Say that I'm a quiet person. I am a quiet person. I don't speak out much in a group. I am more of the listener than talker. I have some deep thoughts, but I don't share them. And I can see how I am changing and you are impacting my life. How do you as a leader find out that I am changing and that maybe I am potential disciple maker, you know?
Good question. So remember that I'm not doing this in my own strength. I'm partnering with the Holy Spirit. Really important. I'm praying for everyone that I'm involved in, that I'm invested in. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to recognize that people are listening. Quiet people are, to me, brilliant for discipleship because they are exactly the opposite of the people that the church goes for. Unless you're loud, jumpy around, extrovert, you're no good on a Sunday morning. And so the people that get left behind are the people who think quite often before they speak, more thoughtful, and they often take notes, and they often are the people that I think you can partner with people to go deeper with. And so if you're a quieter person and more reflective person, then I think potentially you're going to be very, very valuable to somebody in terms of walking through life with them. So people, the other thing is you go with people who show up, don't you? There's this great definition of democracy. Democracy is about people, the people who take decisions are the people who turn up. So if you're running a group and you start off with 23 and you're left with 5, then those 5 are the people that I would say God has given you. Those are the 5 people that you work with, and those are the 5 people you try and make the most of. Jesus is not interested in people having big groups if those groups are all about themselves. There is a lot of quiet people, I'm sure, following Jesus who went on and did amazing things.
Sorry for drilling even deeper. As you said, there is Holy Spirit working in this, and this is the most important part. By ourselves we can do nothing. I've met you. I've met some other people from Navigators. I would say totally different spectrums. Some very quiet, some very outspoken, some very radical, or extreme in their approach to discipleship, extreme in, I'm giving my whole life for this. I'm not gonna have work for next 3 decades. This is all I'm going to be doing, which is amazing. But what you said this thing that at this first time you had somebody who came over to you and said, what do you want to do? You said, I want to be prime minister. What a small vision. He walked away. So it sounds to me like he didn't have the chance to get to know you. You were not in the same group. It sounds to me almost like if somebody came to you on a corridor at university, says out of the blue, what do you want to do? Then walks away. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but it just worked with me. I mean, I think he provoked me. So one level you could say he didn't know me, I didn't know him. So his comment, could have just dropped and died there. I could have been offended and upset and, well, forget him. Who is he? But I didn't. And I would say sometimes, being provocative to people captures their attention. So what I've just said about significance and prominence is a really challenging 2 sides of people's lives, because you could argue that someone who's significant may become prominent. Okay. Mother Teresa, someone like that. Mother Teresa, someone who set up a charity, devoted herself to the poor, only became famous because of the amazingness of that. She didn't seek to be famous. But invariably in life, someone who seeks to be prominent, that's their ambition, very rarely is significant. Very rarely has the kind of impact that they could have had if they put themselves second. And so I think that is why his comment to me was so provocative, because I had been challenged on my ambition, my vision. Your vision is so small. And then when he talked about it, it's like, what's God's vision, Adam? Talk to me about what God's vision, and also what's God's vision for your life. You may want to be, you may feel, that there's some special calling on your life to be prime minister. Talk to me about that. But is that actually why you've been put on earth? And I think the one of the best things about meeting with people is you give people permission to turn your life upside down a bit. I don't know whether that's, I would hesitate to say that that's ever happened in your life through me, but there will be people that you come across in your life who you want to spend time with because they have changed your whole perspective. And Jesus did that to me and turned my life upside down. Even being born into a Christian family, I had to decide to give my life to Jesus. And my life would be so much easier if I wasn't a Christian. And even though it'd be very, obviously that'd be the wrong track. I know that I would be less bothered about all the things that I'm bothered about. And so he changed my life, and this guy's initial investment in just provoking me to shake me up has been great. And just following from that, I've made life choices more recently to trust God with my everyday more than I did when I was in full-time employment with a big vision for my life for 20 years of working in politics. The last 5 years, I've not had a plan. I've not had a regular income. And if I've had a regular income, it's been quite small. And my whole framework for trusting God has had to really shift into a different gear, which has made me very uncomfortable. But I think that's about being a disciple. Again, so I am following Jesus as I want people who I'm investing in to follow me as I teach them how to follow him.
You mentioned this almost radical. I would guess plenty of people would say, well, but if you're gonna come with this radical question or radical statement, your vision is small or there is greater purpose for you. A great number of people would get offended. Some people would be like, oh, I don't want to be part of the church, what if this navigator who came to you and said, what a small vision, what if you wouldn't chase him? Like, how do you look at this from today's perspective?
So just on that point, if I hadn't chased him, then if my involvement with discipleship or the Navigators or this guy was important to God, then I would meet him again, or something else would have happened. Because I was moving to the same city. I was going to see him again. This was not a random social one-off interaction. So I was going to see him again. So whether he had put much thought into that comment, and I suspect he hadn't really, or he was just, because he's an extrovert, he just said what the first thing that came to his mind. But he's someone who has a relationship with Jesus Christ, has a relationship with the Holy Spirit. And so I feel that if you're in partnership with God, God speaks through you. Sometimes you're not even aware that that's a word from God when you talk to people, because you don't know what the Lord wants to explain to them or say to them. Doesn't mean, I don't mean that you necessarily have to go around being rude to people all the time or just saying things to get people's attention, because clearly that's not always going to work and could end up, you could end up being slapped around the face. But I think I would say I am much more people focused than I am process focused. And that can get me, I love process, but it can get me into a bit of trouble because I can see the person and not the process. And sometimes you need to have more process to go through life with. But in relation, just to talk about you for a minute, I saw you when you came into my life as someone who was a Christian, was very excited about being a Christian and wanted to talk to people about Jesus. So straight off, have I got to pay attention to you being a Christian? Because I'm hearing you talk about the good news of Jesus. So it's not about, oh man, we've got some issues, he's not a Christian. I don't have to worry about that. You're a Christian. The words of your mouth are telling me where your heart is. So what am I focused on? I'm focused on, wow, this guy's passion and his desire to spread the good news fits perfectly into enabling this guy to not only just tell one person or tell 2 or 3 people or even a room full of 100 people, but to help him multiply himself. So it's not just to tell other people about Jesus, but to teach him or help him learn the skills to make sure the person he's talking to not only hears it, but takes it and grows it themselves in other people. So for the 100 people that you may be talking to Jesus about, only 3 of those people might be really interested in becoming Christian. And it's to get your focus. I guess my intention was to get your focus off those 100 people and seeing that as failure if 100 people didn't become Christians, to say, right, 3 people really interested. Now what do I do with them? Or what do you do with those three people? And taking those three people as individuals as well, not seeing them as just a group. They're all on the same page. Take them as individuals. Where are they in their life? And then starting the Jesus process with them from where they're at, not trying to take them through a book that starts over here, which is nowhere near where they are, or you know what I mean? So I saw you in terms of huge skill, huge enthusiasm, clearly the Holy Spirit involved in your life. How then can I support you in your growth? Because I may never see you again after the next 12 months. So what's important for me to impart into you? If that's going to be important. And I guess I also made an assumption. This is the other important thing, is not to wait to be invited. So I didn't wait for someone to say, Adam, I would like you now to meet with Mac. And Mac, I would now like you to meet with Adam. And this is going to be, I just had to initiate conversation or follow up on conversation and listen to what you're saying. And also personality's got a lot to do with it. It's quite possible that, two people are not going to get on with each other.
Yeah.
In which case, try and find someone who would. Maybe my job might be, well, actually, I'm not the best person personality-wise. This person might be better. And then subtly help them, get to know you. So understanding what success looks like was a real ingredient. It wasn't the 100. It could be the 3. And then how do you make that successful? Because through those 3 people, you could invariably meet another 100 people because of what they do. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I keep thinking about, there is this phrase we repeat in Christianity: what would Jesus do? And I know that there was a lot of time when I was my view of Jesus, like Jesus was there on the horizon and I could see him, and I was like, trying to see what would he do. But around the corner, you were there. And so there was often this question, what would Adam do?
Well, you're very great. You're very generous and far too much really for me. But I would say things like, in reply to that, this life on life thing that we talked about, this mutual impact is really important. And I could see that. So I could see you being much more evangelistically minded and at ease in a room of non-Christians talking about your faith than me. And so you would challenge me just by how you behave in me being better at it and having more confidence at it. So 15 years difference in age, whatever it is in terms of being a Christian, you're teaching me how to be a better evangelist. And I'm learning from you. So I have been in situations and recently with doing some talks to international students, I have been in that room thinking, what would Mac do? And how would you go about it? Many years ago, I was in charge of a student group of about, 25 people. And on the first day that I had to lead and open that I was in charge, I really bummed. The guy who was in charge of it over me, he was there to help. But I was really bad. And he gave me some feedback about how I could do things. And I decided the next week that what I was going to do was absolutely be like him, genuinely like him, like I was going to do a mimic of him. And so I thought, right, how does he start the meeting and get everyone together? So I did it. I stood up like he did. And I said, and I went outside of I'm an extrovert, but even in social situations, I lack a bit of confidence. And so I stood up in the room and said, hey guys, welcome. It's good to see you. I actually did his voice, or tried to do his voice and his mannerisms, so that I could put on a bit of an act or a bit like, put on the coat. Like Elijah gave Elisha his robe, so when Elisha put on his robe, he must have felt like, I have Elijah's robe, I'm going to be okay. So I did that. And after a while, obviously I needed to find my own voice, but initially that was very helpful. Yeah. So I think we do that. I think when we look to people who are helping us in our faith journey, we can take on a bit of their characteristics. And that, I think, is biblical. And I think it's perfectly fine, because Paul says the same thing. Jesus says, do as I do. You've seen what I've done. And Paul says it very clearly. You've seen what I do. I want you to do that. So I think that's okay. And then you get more confident and trust the Holy Spirit, like, leads you into your own kind of style, or you find your own style. But initially, I would expect that to be something that someone would say. So what you said to me makes me think, okay, maybe this is working. I mean, it was a good indicator for me. Maybe this is working. If he's saying, what would Adam do? And I think you've got more comfortable in your skin. I mean, the other thing to add to all of this is that we are people who are growing and getting older and changing, and life hits us and different things change our opinions all the time. So I think you'll notice yourself shift. And when we read Paul, right at the beginning, how like annoying do you think Paul was when he became a Christian? How annoying to the church in Jerusalem? How annoying to, the fight between him and Barnabas. Barnabas discipled Paul, and here's Paul saying, have nothing to do with Mark. And Barnabas saying, I'm going to have everything to do with Mark, and you and I will just separate for a time. And then you read Paul later, calmer, loves Mark, is sad because of where he is and where he wants to be, and he just has a completely different perspective on life and people. And so you and I, as certainly if we stick in relationship with each other, we'll see ourselves as old men or older men, and look back at our younger selves and see those changes more readily. You're not in middle life. I'm in middle age, and I'm very different to how I was when I was your age, and very different to 30 to how I was when I was 21. So our ability to disciple shifts and change. So I notice that, yes, I've got more experience and therefore more mistakes to share with people. In my talking with people, I'm much more interested now than I was in hearing what they have to say, and then maybe supporting, because people talk invariably about what matters to them. So if I ask lots of questions, I'm not necessarily hearing what they really want to tell me. They say, for example, that if you're not talking to a man about sex, you're not talking to him, because men think about sex a lot. And while I don't know whether that's true or not, that's a really good intimacy level of, are you talking to people about what matters to them, not what matters to you? And I think in discipleship, that's a real lesson in whether you're succeeding, is how much of your conversation with the person you're meeting with is about them or about you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also a good indication of when, people who try and impose themselves in your life. I'm going to be your mentor. I'm going to be your discipler. That's not going to work, because it's all about them. And it's the people who come alongside that you didn't even notice what they were doing, that you start to learn from those people without even realizing it. Those are the people that are actually paying attention to you. So I think I've learned that as I get closer to 45 than when I was 30. And that to me is a really important lesson. I think 90% of being an alongsider or a disciple maker is just turning up, being available.
Yeah. Previously you mentioned about connecting the dots of when you were talking about you being in life of your son, about this being one person being exposed to the other person's character. And I can definitely say this was between me and you. How do you find time? So say I'm leading a group, I'm working 40 hours a week, I'm traveling hour each direction. This is 50 hours of my week already gone. I need to eat, I need to shower, I need to sleep. I've got wife, I've got children. It's becoming just a few hours a week of being available to others. say that I'm leading the group, I'm preparing Bible study. Now I've got 2-3 hours left in my life to do this discipleship, to do this, to be this person in somebody's life so that they can observe me and do the same. How do you do discipleship in this?
Well, I would think that looking at what you've just described there of the busyness and the intensity of life, you're modeling something right there. And so you have to think, is that actually what I want to be modeling? So for a start, I start every day with God and the Bible, and I carve out time in the Word, and I do a Bible reading plan that takes me through the Bible through the year, and I make notes of what I'm reading, and that's how I start my day. So even if other things have to take a back seat, or I get to things a bit later, I get up early anyway, but I have to do that. So that sets the tone for my day. And the next thing is my son. So he is who God has given me. And after my that period of time, I'm getting him up, getting him dressed, having his breakfast, and getting him off to school. That commitment is discipleship. I'm committed to him right there. And so even if I am in a position of I've got a work to go to, my priority levels have got to have a hierarchy. And so the other thing to bear in mind is that in all that busyness, and even with a hierarchy, I need to begin with the end in mind with this. So I have to begin with, what is it that I want to get out of each of those relationships, each of those jobs? And if I took it to, like you just described, a 40-hour week, how successful am I going to be on all of that stuff? Really, genuinely, it's just not possible to do all of those things well. And I would definitely want to carve out time which allows me to model something which is healthy and sustainable, but also really does allow me to invest in people. And that's why I think when we talk about in that business, say you were preaching in that, potentially in that busy week, you might have also been preparing a sermon and you're about to preach, right? And on a Sunday, you're standing in front of a church. Right, and you finish that sermon, you think, right, I've done that. Have you invested in all those people? Yes, but to a level. Was that the most important use of my time? Could I have done something different that week that would invested in people in a different way? I always struggled in professional life to have a proper daily relationship with Jesus. Working politics, got up way too early, went to bed way too late, in the middle of the day, rushing from meeting to meeting to meeting. I had very little contact with my son. And so I had to change the way I lived in order to have a proper relationship with my son, which now starts that we have breakfast every morning together. So sometimes I guess the point I'm trying to make long-windedly is you have to decide what's important. And you can only deliver, you can only minister to people from an overflow in your own life. Which is why I'm saying I have to start with the Bible. I have to start with Jesus every morning. Because what am I going to say at breakfast to my son? Or the person I meet when I go to work? About Jesus, because I've not spent any time with him, or I've not heard from him, and I've not read his Bible. And I could start a conversation with, I was reading today this. And I think it's better to start the day like that rather than at the end, because I'm too tired. So I think a key point from all that business is you can only minister from an overflow. So if you are doing 40 hours here and you're doing all of this work, you have to accept that your intimacy and the depth at which you can reach with people will be very limited. And then you have to ask yourself, is that what I want? So the prioritization of your busyness, and then making sure that your spiritual life is overflowing so that you can share that. If you've got a bottle of water that's only got a little bit of water in, well, that's really for you, isn't it? You can't share that with anybody, really. But if you've got lots of bottles of water because, you've stocked up and you've paid money and here, you can have a bottle, you can invest in people.
I was thinking because I was working there. Obviously, we met in particular work environment. I was a church intern at age 30, which is not what usually you do. And I remember we had my desk was facing your desk. I would lift my head, I would see your beautiful smile.
I knew that was coming.
And we had this environment when it was pretty easy to be in one another life within constraints of the work. Yeah. I remember sometimes I wanted to deal with someone in church, with our now friend, and I would say to you, Adam, I'm really annoyed by this. I want to go and say, I wrote this email, and what do you think about it? And I read email to you, and you put hand on your face, and you are like, Mark, no, this is not how you do it. This is what you do it. Go and speak to this person. And I had this amazing privilege of being around you at least 20 hours a week.
At least.
And you had this chance to actually, because it was within the church, you had this chance to actually say, Mark, let's read the Bible. Let's sit down, let's pray. Let's think about it. Let's go for a walk and talk about it. This modeling, today I am where I am in massive part because of this relationship I had with you. I am now training to be ordained. I am definitely for discipling, definitely for multiplication. I love God more than I did before. And so there was this, I feel like it was being in church, being in this internship, it was like incubator where I could actually properly grow. It's hard to do it when you are in work, where you cannot openly talk about your faith, where you cannot openly talk about your God, your beliefs and everything. I recently had conversation with my friend who is now away. We used to work together, and he was telling me about the impact I had on him. It took about 5-6 years of knowing him, and he said, Mark, you were very strategic. I said, I don't think I was. I had very little to do outside of my work and the church. Like after work, I would have a small group with people from church. I would play the football with people from church, but also people from outside of the church. We would go to cinemas. There were birthdays. We would help moving somebody's house. There is always somebody moving house in church. I would do normal things like watching Netflix and wasting time on computer games and so on. But still, I had, as he puts it, I had some impact on his life within the work, something that moved him from A to B, and I'm very proud of who he became. But I'm also kind of wondering because in a lot of mega churches, there's thousands of people. Sorry, I'm kind of going in different direction. I want to stay on this workplace. Mm-hmm. For me, it was about being showing that I'm a servant. Hey, would you like a coffee? Or I would go through the room, and I was manager. I would go through the room and I would ask everybody in the room if they want coffee. It was, even though I was higher, or let's say in a workplace hierarchy, I would still be servant to those who were in a warehouse, or to the cleaning lady. I would ask about the week. I would have normal conversation as if it's very flat structure. For me, I've seen it as we are all equal. And I know that those were those little interactions that were kind of challenging, that can be challenging, because why is he doing this? You know, how do you see things like this? How did you have a chance in your life to implement things like this?
Well, let's just deal with the busyness thing to begin with. You and I did spend an awful lot of time together, and that was great. But that was quite an unreal environment, really. So that would not be the norm. Yes, lots of people spend lots of time with each other, but in the relationship, in the disciple thing that you and I talked about, that's quite unusual. However, it does mean, however, that we all meet with people and we all spend a lot of time with people that are not at home. So there is an opportunity to invest in people, even if they're not Christians. So you can disciple people who are not Christians into Christianity. So that's important. Spending a lot of time with that person is very important. You mentioned this equality. It's funny. I've always found that a lot of people I've come into contact with often say things to me like, "Oh, I didn't expect you to talk to me," or didn't expect you to have listened to my opinion. And some of the jobs I've had have been quite senior jobs, and people put people like me at a certain level, and they don't ever expect to have any contact. And it reminded me quite a lot of a story about John F. Kennedy when he went to at the time Cape Canaveral in Florida to look at the space center there, and he was walking down the one of the corridors, and he stopped to talk to someone, to ask them a question, and it turns out that person was a janitor or a cleaner, caretaker, but he didn't know that, so he just said, "Oh, what do you do here?" And the guy's reply was beautiful. He just said, "I help to put men into space." And Kennedy was very good and carried on walking. And two things happened there. Kennedy just being willing to talk to anybody. And the second thing is that person's perception of their contribution. And I think I would love to get to a point where what you and I say to people, and the way we behave, gets rid of any of that distinction, class, background, to enable people to meet with Jesus, so that they're all, when you say, "What do you do?" I'm saving lives. I'm helping people to know God. Because Jesus did that, didn't he? Jesus ministered to a woman who had been brought out of a difficult moment, embarrassed moment, socially ostracized. He dealt with people who were prostitutes, people who were drunks, people who were tax collectors. He leveled the playing field for everyone and said, "You all have access to the Father through me." And that's what we want to be, access to the Father, and making everything really straightforward, which is why I like this one-to-one level of discipleship, because it's about the relationship that person has with Jesus Christ. I'm not bothered about whether they stack chairs on a Sunday or they're behind the coffee counter or they're doing something. It's not about that. It's about you knowing about Jesus and what it takes to become a Christian, what that means for the rest of your life. Busyness will always stop you and I having that personal relationship. So we have to fight for the right amount of time, prioritizing who we spend time with. So your family is very, very important. That's who God's given you first and foremost. So I was talking about that with my son. And then next comes God. And then next comes other people outside the family. So you've got God, your family, and other people. And obviously we all need to earn money. But again, that goes to the heart of our relationship with Jesus, isn't it? So when I was earning money in a secular role, I would think, "Oh, I'm earning money. I'm the one working." Now I'm not in that. I'm not working. No one's paying me anymore. I'm now thinking, "Oh, I'm surviving. Lord help me, Lord help me." And I remember very early on, I felt the Lord say to me, "Adam, why is it you think that I'm only helping you now? Did you not think that when you were earning all that money, I was helping you then? Because, I helped you get those jobs. I kept you in those jobs. You were in the place where I wanted you to be. So all the money that you had then came from me. So it's not, do you know what I mean? So he changed my perception of what was important, where to invest my time, how to trust him. And I think for you, who's only going to get busier, you're going to become ordained. You're going to become a vicar, which is going to be, I'm going to be crying that day. And you are going to run a church, plant hundreds of churches. You're always going to be busy. Always. There's always going to be a moment of your life where you're going to think, I've got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. So the question is, Mac, how do you make yourself successful in the kingdom? What's the standard you are setting yourself? What does success look like? And how do you prioritize what's important? So when you're like Nicky Gumbel and you're sitting on an organization that is, by any standards, very successful, what is it you're going to tell people? Every morning I spend time with God, and I spend time with the people most important to me. And then I spend time with these people. Or I get on a plane and I go to Amsterdam and I preach here. I go on a plane and I go to Bangkok and I preach there. And I speak to thousands of people. And I have Zoom calls with very important ministers and prime ministers. Or I'm investing my life in these people, like Jesus carved out 3 years of his life and spent it with these people. So I think discipleship challenges a lot of us about what is success. Because if you were to compare some of our big Christian leaders with some of the more invisible people that you've come across, you have to think to yourself, who's being significant, who's being prominent, who's making the most difference, who's actually adding to discipleship. It doesn't mean I won't say, what would Nicky Gumbel do? But I have no relationship with Nicky Gumbel. Nicky Gumbel has, just using him as an example, never made a personal impact on my life outside of a TV screen. But I know people who have had that, and they've grown and they've gone and planted churches. So that's all cool. But in terms of your impact on people, I imagine it's going to be in a way which fits your personality, but will only be successful if you make the time for the things that we've talked about today.
Yeah. To me, it is showing really more people gonna listen to it, more people gonna see it. I still see it, and I see it as a sign of love. You are still, Mark, I'm talking to you. I am interested in you, in growing you, even though it's like.
Well, this is being recorded, or it's not being recorded. I mean, I am interested in you. You won't know how many times I think, I haven't messaged him, or I haven't had set some time aside. And sometimes life overwhelms me, and has overwhelmed me with different things. But I don't want this to sound like a song, but you are always on my mind. You are always, in there. And there are, and other people in my life who I've spent time with and trying to invest in. It's family. It's almost like family, isn't it? It's that relationship. So I am very excited about your growth. I mean, when you take the perspective that you invest in people rather than in buildings or in programs, okay, you are the emotional bit for me. Your success is the thing I'm concerned about. When people are like really passionate about Alpha, you've seen them, or they're really passionate about, maybe a church multiplying organization. And they're really passionate about this program or this seminar or this conference, and they get emotional where the tech doesn't work. And, and you think, how unimportant is that compared to, is my friend surviving in a world that wants to rip him down and tear him? Is he praying? Is he able to read his Bible? Is he able to talk to other people about Jesus? Because actually, at the end of the day, that's what it should all be about. I watched I don't know whether you're going to go through this on your program, but I'll say anyway. I got the DVD of the Chosen. I've been trying to watch it on the app on my phone for ages and never managed to complete it. So that I need to buy the DVD because I'm an old man and that's the only way I can learn things. So I got it and I've been watching it, and I was thinking, I'm not going to be emotional. And then just right off the bat in episode 1, where Jesus heals Mary Magdalene of whatever it is that's wrong with her brain, and suggests that she's got evil spirits. Tears were just coming down my face because of the way he came into her world and met her need, and it wasn't about him. In that moment, it was all about her. I'm going to heal you. And what better program, what better model than that? It's all about that person and trying to help them on their journey to knowing Jesus better. And so tears were coming down my face because I was thinking, I'd have that any day of the week, 1-to-1 on my own with Jesus. Forget any other program. Fantastic. And if you can be the person that helps that relationship for somebody else, wow, that's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah. Adam, we thank you so much for joining me today. We're gonna have probably a couple more opportunities to chat. This was such a blessing.
Likewise. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.